driven arguments are. And so I want to talk about something different, and that is what we stand for, because it's pretty easy to see what we stand against. We stand against big government. We stand against intrusiveness. We stand against the idea of a nanny state that can make all your decisions for you. We stand against the idea of a politically correct society that refuses to acknowledge facts. We can stand against all those things, but what is it that we stand for? What is it that animates us and gives us that core of strength so that we can walk into unfriendly situations and make the points that we want to make and feel like we're doing something that's useful and good, not just fighting bad people? Because I do think that there is a difference between being conservative and being anti-left. And I think that if that difference is obscured, then we end up letting bad people into our own movement. And I think that we are not the most effective fighters on behalf of conservatism we can be. Again, very easy to fight the left, not as easy to promulgate good ideas. So I want to talk about some of those good ideas today, which is something that I think that we need to do more of in the conservative movement. So what is it that we are actually fighting for? So I would say that conservatism is basically fighting for the idea that there is a meaning and a purpose to life that is discoverable and that requires a free people in order to pursue. And that would be the short answer. And what I mean by that is that America and America's founding was based on these twin foundations, the foundation of a Judeo-Christian moral system and the foundation of a rational moral philosophy springing from Greece but moving on through British philosophy and philosophers like John Locke. And we need to talk about why that has built the greatest society in the history of the world. Why is it that these ideas are so good? Why are they so valuable? So to begin, the pursuit of happiness that Thomas Jefferson talks about in the Declaration of Independence is not just supposed to be a phrase meaning you can do whatever you want. That's not what the pursuit of happiness means. People take it as though the pursuit of happiness is basically, you know, if you decide to get drunk in your dorm room, you're pursuing happiness, or if you decide to volunteer at a soup kitchen, you're pursuing happiness. That's not what Jefferson meant. That's not what the founders meant. What the founders meant is they meant that happiness, human happiness, was something definable and discoverable, that everyone had, in essence, the same goal of being happy, but that happiness could not be achieved unless you were seeking a purpose. And what was that purpose? Well, the ancients believed that that purpose was becoming a virtuous person. Right? This is what Aristotle talks about, the idea that virtue is something that we have to pursue. Right? That you were created with a telos, you were created with a goal, and that in order to pursue that, you had to cultivate your own virtue, that these were tools toward the establishment of a purpose in your life. Judeo-Christian values believe the same thing. Right? The Bible talks very often, frequently, about the idea that you are put here to serve God. Happiness is a function of service. Happiness is a function of a purpose that means something more than you just getting your rocks off. Well, that being the case, the founders had a plan for achieving this. Right? They're uniting these two disparate strands in philosophy, and they had an idea of how to achieve all of this. Right? And George Washington talks openly about this. He says, the consideration that human happiness and moral duty are inseparably connected will always continue to prompt me to promote the progress of the former by inculcating the practice of the latter. In other words, duty and virtue are a prerequisite to happiness. And this is something that I think even libertarians in the crowd should understand, is that what allows us to have a functioning society is that we are a free people ensconced in liberty who have a duty to one another on a social level to help one another. This is why churches are important. This is why communities are important. This is why groups like this are important, people at EF. So the founders basically knew that we needed four things in order for us to find this purpose. First, we need individual purpose, like what do we do today? Second, we need a communal purpose. What can we all do together that's valuable and makes us feel like a community that's worth preserving? Why don't we just break off into 10 different countries because we have a common purpose? Third, individual capacity. You as an individual human being have the capacity to pursue your goals. Right? It's not that you're a victim of white privilege. It's not that you're a victim of the system. It's not that you're a victim of income inequality. You have the capacity as an individual human being to make good decisions and therefore pursue both your individual and your communal purpose. And finally, a communal capacity. We have to have a system that allows us to do all of these things. So we need individual purpose because without it, we are just a bunch of balls of meat randomly floating through the universe, stumbling around. And that is what the idea is behind Judeo-Christian morality, right? The individual purpose, the creation of virtue, this was the goal of the Constitution of the United States, right? This is what John Adams says. He says, our Constitution was made for a moral and religious people. It is wholly inadequate to the government of any other, right? The whole idea here is that individuals with purpose would create our society, and that purpose was going to be something that we held in common, which was the cultivation of certain virtues, the virtues of charity, the virtues of decency, the virtues of bravery, right? All of these virtues were things that we should aim at cultivating, and that would make us happier human beings. We need a communal purpose, too, because we're social creatures. We always have to feel like we're part of something bigger. It's why people join political movements. And you're either going to join, as you see on the left, a utopian political movement that tears down everyone in its path in pursuit of some terrible utopia, or you're going to be part of a communal movement that sees the individual value as the core. Right? That's the communal purpose, is to create a community where we see each other as individuals and to fight for a community where we see each other as individuals. Religious communities saw themselves as shining cities on a hill. Ronald Reagan saw America as a shining city on a hill. Nationalism, which you keep hearing people throw around, it doesn't mean anything unless the communal purpose for the nation means something. The borders are less important than the purpose. And it's not enough to have these purposes unless you have the hopes of realizing these purposes. Right? Individual purpose, communal purpose. Now you need to be able to realize those purposes. We need the capacity to do that. There's nothing more frustrating in life than having a mission that you have no capacity to fulfill. I think one of the reasons that the left is so angry is because they've been told for generations now that you as an individual do not have the capacity to succeed. You do not have the capacity to take control of your own life. You're stuck in a system that hates you. That'd make you pretty angry too. And that's why the left keeps saying it to people. It's why it keeps saying to the young black kid growing up in the inner city, you're living in a country that's seeking to put its boot on your neck to prevent you from fulfilling your purpose. That allows the left to then take that kid and turn that kid into a weapon against the system itself. You deprive people of their individual capacity and you turn them into tools for collectivism. Individual capacity means that we have to recognize that we have reason, that objective truth exists. And then finally, we need communal capacity. We need the ability as a community to have the freedom to move within these boundaries. We need a constitutional system, a small government system where we can exercise our free will and cultivate virtue in the best way that we can see fit. The reason that we fight the left is because the left opposes all four of these things. All four of these things are opposed by the philosophical left. The left does not believe in individual purpose. It doesn't believe in communal purpose. It doesn't, or at least it believes in a different communal purpose. It doesn't believe in individual capacity, and it does not believe in collective capacity. It doesn't believe in individual purpose because in a scientific materialist universe where you mean nothing, right? You don't have a soul, you're a set of firing synapses, then what purpose could that have? You know, people like Sam Harris, I'm going to debate Sam Harris in early December, and one of the things that I'm looking forward to talking with him about is how do you establish the idea of a human purpose on the back of a biological creature that does not have free will and is simply a relationship of material to material? How does that happen? Once you rob people of the idea that they're special, that they're made in God's image, that they are here for a reason, once you do that, then people immediately become susceptible to all sorts of terrible things. Right? They give up on the idea of change. They give up on the idea of betterment, self-betterment particularly. The left also opposes the idea of a collective capacity, or rather a collective purpose. The left's collective purpose is the idea that the individual should not even factor in. Right? The French Revolution was based on the idea that the collective should trump the individual. The Declaration of Independence is very different from the French Declaration of the Rights of Man. The Declaration of Independence says we are created as individuals with certain inalienable rights. The French Declaration of the Rights of Man says that any individual right that comes into conflict with a communal right, the individual loses. So the communal purpose is whatever the state says it is, which is what we've seen from the left. They'll shift on a dime as to what the purpose is today, but it's always that the community trumps the individual right, invariably. Individual capacity is something that the left has argued against. The idea that you have the capacity to do anything, not just by blaming society, but you as an individual, again, you don't have free will, right? You are whatever your IQ made you. You are whatever evolution made you. You don't have the capacity to change yourself. Reason means nothing. There's no such thing as objective truth. Truth is just whatever you feel today, right? Subjective truth is everything. Once you believe that, there's no capacity to even communicate with one another. If we can't even agree that truth exists, it's very difficult for me to explain to you why what I'm saying matters to you. We're all stuck in our own little bubbles. And finally, communal capacity. The left doesn't believe that we have communal capacity in the United States. They believe the system is designed to repress true freedom in the form of a Marxist materialism. They believe that the government needs to be bigger in order to quash the collective capacity that we currently have. So this is what we're fighting. We're fighting against the idea that we are living a rootless, meaningless existence that can only be given meaning by some sort of overarching aristocracy of the great, right? The geniuses, the Noam Chomskys of the world, right? The idea that the Supreme Court, there's a group of people who are so smart they can decide for you what your meaning should be and how the community ought to be structured. That's what we're fighting against. And we are fighting on behalf of the notion that you as an individual have a meaning that is discoverable and reasonable and relatable and pursuable. And if we fight for that, then we're fighting for something valuable and worthwhile. And all this other stuff, tax rates, important, not nearly as important as these underlying issues. Right? If we can't win the battle for objective truth, for reason, for purpose, then marginal tax rates don't seem to matter very much. And if we don't get off and what this also suggests is that our politics has to be something higher. It can't just be anti-left. It can't just be that we're willing to greenlight anyone who pretends to be on our side who fights the left. Right? We have standards for our own side. And those standards exist for our own side, even if it means that we have to take a temporary L in order to get the final W. Okay, this idea that we have to win every battle in order to win the war is wrong. You can win every battle, but if every battle requires you to sacrifice the very meaning of the battle that you are fighting, the war itself is meaningless. That is not, by the way, that is not a comment on people's votes in the 2016 election. I understand why people voted for President Trump. I think you can have good logic and still hold by what I'm saying here and vote for President Trump. But it is a suggestion that we ought to be constantly examining our own hearts and determining whether what we are doing is being done on the basis of a moral system or whether it's being done because we think that the ends justify the means. With that said, if we can hold true to a moral standard, I do have hope, and I think the founders had hope too, that human beings are persuadable to a better perspective, that they are persuadable to a better morality. We have to believe that, otherwise why bother living in a republic? So if we stand for something better, which we do, then we will win in the end. It might take a little bit longer, but the victory will be more final when we do win. Thanks so much. Happy to take your questions.